Last video, I went through the first half of my top 50 overall coasters from 50 to 26, and today it's time for the top 25. Looking at this top 25 compared to the one I made in 2022, so much has changed that it's hardly even the same list anymore. I've been lucky enough to experience so many new coasters and parks in the last couple of years and expand my coaster count to over 250. Before getting into my top 25, let's break it down by manufacturer real quick. Intamin stands at the top with 8 coasters, followed closely by RMC with 7. B&M had a lot of coasters in the lower half of my top 50, but only has 3 here. And finally, we have 7 different manufacturers with 1 coaster each. I've always thought of Intamin, B&M, and RMC as the big 3 when it comes to coaster manufacturers, and that definitely appears to be the case for my favorite coasters. Anyway, without further ado, let's get into my top 25 coasters for 2025. Coming in at number 25 is Millennium Force at Cedar Point. The world's first Giga Coaster still holds up as an amazing ride despite the lack of airtime and other forces. While I do typically prefer rides with airtime or strong positive Gs, I still love coasters that give you a crazy sense of speed, and there are a few that do that better than Millie. It's just a super smooth, long, and fast ride that you can't help but love. It also has one of the best lift hills out there with that beautiful view of Lake Erie before you plummet 310 feet to the ground. Millennium Force sometimes gets overshadowed by the top dogs at Cedar Point, but is still an amazing ride in its own right. At number 24 is a very different kind of coaster, also built by Intamin, and that's Storm Runner at Hershey Park. This has my favorite launch of all the currently operating coasters that I've ridden, and that alone would give it a good spot on my list. But the fact that it also has some great elements to follow its top hat are just the icing on the cake. A front row ride on Storm Runner will have you flying out of your seat as you go over that initial top hat, and before you know it, you're graying out in the valley below. Then you get to the flying snake dive, which is one of the weirdest elements I've experienced, but it's also a blast. This coaster may have a short layout, but it makes the most out of what it has. Number 23 is perhaps one of the most legendary coasters ever built with the Beast at Kings Island. Look, this may not be the tallest, fastest, or most intense coaster, but it's certainly one of the most fun. It's one of those things that's hard to explain, but zooming through the trees feeling like you're in the middle of nowhere is just super fun. Beast has been in my top 25 ever since I rode it for the first time, but this year I took it to another level by getting the opportunity to get that coveted night ride. And when I tell you that it lived up to every bit of that hype, I mean it. Not being able to see anything made it 10 times cooler, and the Helix finale especially felt even more intense in the dark. There's only one other night ride that I could see being on par with this one, but we'll discuss that a bit later. Number 22 is the Incredible Hulk at Islands of Adventure. This has been a favorite of mine for as long as I can remember. I've made so many visits to Universal throughout my life and have never gotten bored riding this coaster. The incline launch is one of the most unique things that I've experienced, and the intensity is some of the best out there. I do think that after that stellar first half, the ride does start to die out a bit towards the end, but not too much. And on top of the coaster itself, there is of course the amazing theming on the ride and one of the best onboard audio tracks on a coaster in my opinion. Number 21 is Twisted Timbers at King's Dominion. I made my first and currently only visit to King's Dominion in March of 2024, and I had some pretty neutral expectations for this coaster going in. At that point, I had already ridden some of the top RMCs and wasn't really sure how this would stack up compared to those. Well, my rides on Twisted Timbers pretty much just met the expectations I had for it, and you know it's crazy when a manufacturer is so good that just meeting expectations gives you a near top 20 coaster. I love the use of the barrel roll down drop to kick off the ride in an unconventional fashion. Following that is those 3 camelbacks, which for me are the best part of the ride. While it falls short of the best that RMC can do, it is still perfect as that second elite coaster that King's Dominion needed to make it a top tier park. Number 20 is the first RMC hybrid that I ever rode, being Iron Rattler at Six Flags Fiesta Texas. I had extremely high expectations for this coaster going into my trip in 2020, and it managed to completely exceed them. While it is on the shorter side, it has some of the best individual elements out there, starting with that twisted first drop off the quarry wall. For me, it's a top 3 first drop that I've experienced and will be very hard for future coasters to beat. Then, later in the ride, you also have the Heaven Roll and the Cliff Dive as 2 more of my favorite RMC elements. And if all that isn't enough, the night rides I got were absolutely insane and brought the coaster to a whole other level. Iron Rattler was actually my number 1 coaster at the time of riding it, but has since fallen quite a bit due to all the parks I've gotten into and all the insane coasters that I've ridden in more recent years. Number 19 is my favorite coaster at Kings Island, and that's Mystic Timbers. This is for sure the best GCI that I've ridden so far. It's super smooth for a wooden coaster and is filled with the rapid fire airtime moments at all sorts of weird angles, which I love. As much as I love the GCI Twister layouts, this one being more of an out and back layout allows for it to be a better ride, throwing in more of those airtime moments as opposed to turns. It's just so wild and out of control that it's hard not to love. And although it's overshadowed by the beast, Mystic Timbers gives an amazing night ride in its own right, going back into the trees. Simply put, this is one of the best wooden coasters in the US. Number 18 is Goliath at Six Flags Over Georgia. My favorite B&M Hyper coaster is also the first big coaster I ever did. I do have a huge soft spot for this ride because of that, but even still, it has my favorite layout for a hyper despite it being on the shorter side. It's got both floater and ejector airtime moments that are joined together by one of the best turnaround segments ever done. I have had to drop this a bit due to new coasters that I'm riding, as well as the fact that it has gotten significantly rougher over the years. I just started noticing the rattle in 2025, and I'm hoping that Six Flags will eventually do some work to smooth out this magnificent ride. Number 17 is Hagrid's Magical Creatures Motorbike Adventure at Islands of Adventure. While not the most intense ride out there, Hagrid's is one of those coasters that's just a lot of fun to ride with the 7 launches, backward section, drop track, and immaculate theming. I do typically prefer thrills over theming, but when a ride has theming like this, it absolutely elevates the experience. It also just has so many uncommon and unique elements, and on top of that, it's a very long ride. This ride was quite literally getting 12-hour waits when it first opened, and I can definitely see why. At number 16, I have Skyrush at Hershey Park. This is a coaster I was excited to ride for years, but never had the opportunity to get to Hershey Park. Well, in June of 2025, that opportunity arose, and Skyrush did not disappoint. I got plenty of rides on it over my 2 days at the park, and it just got better and better for me as time goes on. My only nitpick was that I actually wasn't the biggest fan of the lap bars, even with them having been replaced recently. I still found them to be a bit uncomfortable on my thighs, especially during those strong airtime moments. But the plus side of that is the Skyrush has some of the best ejector moments on any roller coaster, and in my opinion has intensity that is second to only one other coaster that I'll talk about in a bit. Number 15 is one of my newest credits in my 250th coaster with Guardians of the Galaxy Cosmic Rewind at Epcot. Like Hagrid's, this isn't a super intense coaster, but it's certainly one of the most fun. You get the amazing combo of spinning, darkness, and onboard audio to just make this coaster one big party. I got to ride it a few times throughout my day at Epcot, and I had an absolute blast on it every time. The backwards launch is also a lot more intense than I was expecting it to be, and is a perfect way to kick off this chaotic ride. Number 14 is visually one of the best looking coasters out there, being El Toro at Six Flags Great Adventure. My first visit to Great Adventure was unfortunately on a day when this was broken down, but after seeing it in person and having been so close to riding, my friend and I decided to plan a whole other trip a few months later for the sole purpose of getting on this beast. A row 17 ride on this is matched by few others and gives you the 4 of the greatest airtime moments of all time. The first drop took me by surprise, even with everything I'd heard about it and was expecting. A wooden coaster on this scale is just crazy to think about, and I honestly have a hard time believing that this ride exists and runs as well as it does. And also a big shout out to the ride crew that was there on the day we went. We happened to go on the day that Ace was hosting a site tour for the new King Ka replacement, and the crew they had on El Toro was putting out some of the fastest operations I've ever seen, which is always appreciated. This is currently the only coaster that I've done a more in-depth review on, so if you're looking to hear some more thoughts on it, make sure to go check out that video. At number 13 is Pantherian at King's Dominion. I mentioned that Skyrush's intensity was second only to one, and this is it. Easily the most intense coaster I've ever ridden, and maybe the most intense coaster on the entire planet. This intimate Giga Coaster is perfect if you like positive G's and an insane sense of speed. The only reason it isn't ranked even higher is that I tend to prefer rides with a bit more airtime and more diversity in its ride elements. Regardless, what this ride does, it does great, and I hope that I'll be able to get back to King's Dominion and get on it again soon. Number 12 is my favorite coaster in the state of Pennsylvania with Wildcat's Revenge at Hershey Park. Going into my 2025 trip, I thought for sure that Skyrush would be my favorite coaster in the park, but by the end of my visit, Wildcat's Revenge had the distinct advantage. It has a lot of funky elements compared to other RMCs, with the step-up underflip, the sideways airtime on those wave turns, and the weird double down that has a bit of a curve to it. It even starts off with a great pre-lift section and has some bite if you're sitting in the back row. All the elements flow together perfectly and make for a top-tier and very re-rideable experience. Number 11 is X2 at Six Flags Magic Mountain. This is a really weird one to rank considering it's so much different than any other coaster on the list. Just the concept of the fourth dimension coaster is insane, and it's kinda crazy to believe that a ride like that even exists. I'd say that the only downside to X2 is that it can be somewhat uncomfortable with the bumps in the track and the less than ideal restraints. That alone can make this unfortunately hard to re-ride, but it still pales in comparison to how awesome the ride experience is. I love that you start by getting a great view of the entire rest of the park as you go up the lift hill on your back, right before plummeting face first down into one of the best first drops ever made. I mean, making you face the ground during that large of a drop is a diabolical design choice. The rest of the ride is just a crazy jumble of twists and turns that are all super fun. I even got lucky enough to have the fire effect working during my trip in October 2024. I also didn't find the Raven turn at the end to be very jarring at all, which was a pleasant surprise since I'd heard many things about it being rough. X2 was a top 10 coaster for me for nearly the entirety of 2025, and deservedly so, but unfortunately it had to be dropped out due to some last minute additions that I'll discuss soon. The first coaster to crack my top 10 is gonna be Lightning Rod at Dollywood. I found that even with the removal of the launch that this is still an elite coaster and hasn't had its pacing hurt at all. Don't get me wrong, I do miss the launch, but during my rides in 2024 the train was still going through the layout just as well as it used to, and every element was hitting wonderfully. The sideways airtime on the wave turn and twist and shout elements is perfectly done, and the quad down is one of the best coaster finales you'll find anywhere. I do wish that there were a few more elements thrown into the layout, but that's just a minor nitpick in what is definitely deserving as a top 10 coaster. Number 9 is Maverick at Cedar Point. Since my last top 25 ranking, this has gotten up as high as number 2 on my list, but unfortunately I had to drop it a bit after a somewhat lackluster ride this year. During my trip to Cedar Point in May, I only managed to get one ride, and it was one of the least stellar rides I've had on it. I plan on taking another trip to Cedar Point this year, and will hopefully get some better rides this time around though. Maverick has everything I could want in a coaster. Intensity, great airtime moments, rapid fire pacing and elements, and even 2 launches. I mean, it's just such a great combination of ride elements, and few coasters do it better than this one. The only things holding it back from me right now are the less than ideal restraints and slight roughness in the track. Speaking of which, I'm very excited about these rumors of Maverick getting a retrack in the near future, and even the possibility of the Heartline roll being added back in. If all of that happens, I could easily see this being a top 3 coaster once again. Number 8 is my newest addition to the list, and a coaster that I got on at the very end of December, and that is Stardust Racers at Epic Universe. It's hard to pick where to begin with this coaster, but I'll start with the amazing visuals. The presentation of this coaster is second to none in my opinion, especially when it gets dark and the trains start lighting up. It's truly a spectacle to behold, as is this whole park in general. As for the ride itself, it starts out with a launch under the station that decides to shock you halfway through by hitting another gear, and the best part is that you get to experience it a second time halfway through the ride. And then of course you have the other things like the great airtime moments, dueling feature, and celestial spin that make this a top tier roller coaster. I honestly still can't decide which side of the celestial spin I preferred because they were both amazing. I do lean slightly toward liking the green side better just because it seemed to run noticeably smoother than yellow. The only reason I didn't rank this any higher is because it just doesn't seem to throw stuff at you in a very rapid fire manner. It's kind of hard to explain, and I go into depth on this idea a little bit more in my El Toro review video, as I think El Toro is very similar to Stardust in this manner. But basically, I like when roller coasters throw a lot of elements at you quickly and feel fast-paced, and I just don't think Stardust does that quite the same way as some others do. Regardless, this is still an amazing work of art by Mock Rides and is absolutely a top 10 coaster. At number 7, we have Lil Devil Coaster at Six Flags Great Adventure. Alright, who put that in there? Anyway, my real number 7 is Steel Vengeance at Cedar Point. I'm sure at this point you've heard people talk about everything that makes this ride good 100 times, and yes, the length, pacing, and quantity of airtime are amazing, and objectively this might be the best roller coaster ever built. However, as much as I love this ride, I do find that it feels a bit repetitive in the second half at times, but even still, it's hard to complain about lots of airtime. I just find that at this point, there are other coasters with more distinguishable standout elements that just make them more memorable for me. So yeah, Steel Vengeance, amazing ride, lots of airtime, and objectively spectacular. At number 6, I have Jurassic World Velocicoaster at Universal's Islands of Adventure. As great as Stardust Racers was, I still think this is by far the best roller coaster Universal Studios has ever built. Well, at least until Hollywood Drift opens. The first half is a bit slow, but still has some nice elements and amazing theming as you weave through that raptor paddock. But all bets are off once you hit that second launch. All that happens after that is one of the greatest second halves you'll ever experience, capped off with quite possibly the greatest inversion ever made. On top of that, I just think Velocicoaster has a lot of other stuff going for it, like the top-notch theming, the comfortable restraints, smoothness, and even that nice-looking train design. Intamin plus Universal is just proving to be a crazy combo the more time goes on. Number 5 is far and away the best coaster in the state of Georgia with Air Force One at Fun Spot Atlanta. It's still crazy to me that I can go to this little park in the middle of nowhere and get endless laps on one of the greatest thrill machines ever designed. The sequence of elements with the zero-G stall, outer bank, double up, and arcade roll is truly the pinnacle of roller coaster flow states. I have to just applaud Joe Drapes for dreaming up this layout and RMC for executing it as well as they did. I'm not the biggest fan of the finale, but that's just a minor setback when the rest of the layout is that good. I really don't know what Fun Spot was on when they decided to buy this, but we need more of that mentality in this world. Number 4 is Fury 325 at Carowinds. If you like a sustained sense of speed, then few rides do it as good as B&M's best coaster. This is far and away the best first drop I've ever experienced, and I just don't know what could possibly beat it. The rest of the elements flow together wonderfully and do it while being as smooth as a brand new coaster. I also got a night ride on this during the park's Halloween event, and it was a spectacle seeing the whole park at night while also appearing engulfed in fog with all the effects going on. This is just one of those rides that everyone from a hardcore coaster enthusiast to a member of the general public will love and want to re-ride again and again. Oh, and by the way, it also features the greatest roller coaster restraint of all time. Sorry, I don't make the rules. Fury has been in my top 3 ever since the first time I rode it back in 2021 and has only been pushed out because of a couple new additions in 2025. Number 3 is my favorite coaster at Cedar Point, and that is Top Thrill 2. I was such a huge fan of OG Dragster and was very skeptical about this new version of it. Well, after riding, I think that while it is different, it's just as good, if not better, than the original. Nothing can ever replace that insane launch that Top Thrill Dragster had, especially in the front row. But to replace it, you get the addition of that 100-mile-an-hour backward launch and one of the greatest floater airtime moments ever on that back spike. I still can't believe how long it felt like I was hovering up there looking around the park before the train finally started descending back toward the ground. Top Thrill 2 may not have the length or airtime that other coasters do, but what it's trying to do, it does perfectly, and for me it's one of the greatest things I've ever had the pleasure of experiencing. And if that isn't enough, I also got a night ride which is super cool with everything that surrounds you at Cedar Point. Zamperla has truly made a worthy successor to the beloved Top Thrill Dragster. Taking the silver is Iron Gwazi at Busch Gardens, Tampa. I figured this ride had top 3 potential, but I never imagined I would rank it over Top Thrill 2. Well, after getting quite a few rides on Iron Gwazi in August, it blew me away so much that it had to go here. I got my first ride midday and thought it was about on par with Air Force One and Steel Vengeance, but as the day went on and it warmed up even more, this thing started hauling on a level that I couldn't even imagine. It was tearing through its elements so much that I was literally finding myself breathless on the brake run. And I just can't believe that something this wild doesn't suffer from constant structural problems. Anyway, enough of the superlatives. Iron Gwazi, along with its pacing, has amazing elements. Of course, we all know about the death roll, and while it was amazing, it actually wasn't my favorite element on the ride. That honor goes to the element that immediately follows it with the outer bank as you fly over the station. It's a crazy sustained moment of sideways airtime that I've just never experienced anywhere else. It whips you all the way to the outside before ripping you back to the inside right after. I've mentioned night rides a decent bit with some of these coasters, and Iron Gwazi also has a great one. Aside from the pacing being at its peak, parts of the track light up purple, providing some amazing visuals, and also mixes in some very dark moments with no light. I think that combo makes it a bit unique from other night rides. I believe that Iron Gwazi is truly RMC's magnum opus. Sure, I might be proven wrong someday when I get to Europe or Asia, but for now, Iron Gwazi is the best RMC I've ever ridden and is only topped by one other coaster, period. Sitting atop my list for 5 straight years ever since the day I first rode it is still the Voyage at Holiday World. I love this ride so much that even just thinking about it makes me smile. Just the sheer length, pacing, and rapid fire airtime that this coaster has give it everything it needs to be great. I mean, it's so long that it seemingly defies the laws of gravity and kinetic energy. You also get a good amount of variety with the large camelbacks on the outbound trip, the twister section and the turnaround, and of course the rapid fire smaller airtime moments as you travel downhill on the return trip. It also has a surprisingly intense first drop that you would never see coming when just looking at it. I mentioned near the beginning of this video that only one night ride could rival the Beast, and this is it. I've never gotten one, but I'll be going to Hollywood Nights this year to finally get those trimless night rides and could not be more excited. It's already my number one, but it might find a way to defy the laws of rankings and go even higher. This is truly, in my eyes, the greatest roller coaster ever built, and the fact that Holiday World maintains it so well just leads me to believe that it's going to take something truly ridiculous to dethrone it. The Voyage is without a doubt a masterpiece from the folks at Gravity Group. With that, I conclude my top 50 coasters list for the end of 2025 and start of 2026. I've got many plans to add to my credit count this year and can't wait to see how everything unfolds. If you've made it this far in the video, thank you so much for watching, and I really hope you enjoyed it. I would love to hear your favorite coaster rankings in the comments below. I'll see you guys next time.